Hello again, this is Father Mark here in the Parish of Our Lady of the Scapular in the historic Church of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, continuing our tour of the church by way of the stained glass windows. So now we are working our way down the north wall of the nave. We are kind of in the middle, second from the front, second from the back. Or third from the front, pardon me. This window is the window of St. Anthony of Padua. So I remind you that the church here was started in 1915 and completed in 1916. So our stained glass windows would have been put in probably in the beginning of the year of 1916. They are made in Chicago by the Munich Stained Glass Company, and they are very intricate in the detail of the images, and yet they are kind of simplistic in the outline around the images. So as I've said before, the church is built in what's called the Italian Renaissance style. So when you look at all these windows, you do see the reflection of the architecture in the framework around the image itself. So this particular window, it depicts St. Anthony of Padua. So what do we know about St. Anthony? St. Anthony, well, Padua, by the way, is in Italy, in case you've been out and about. But St. Anthony was born into a noble family in Lisbon, Portugal. He was born on August 15th, 1195. Anthony is his religious name, so at the time of his birth, his baptismal name was Fernando. So later on, as he grew up, he decided to leave his very wealthy family and take on a life of simplicity, religion, and poverty. He first became an Augustinian priest, and during that time, he excelled in his biblical studies. He was considered a biblical scholar of his day. After some time, a short time there, in the Augustinian order, he heard of the new order being recently developed, the Franciscans, and in 1219 he entered the Franciscan order at the age of 24. So he began his work as a traveling preacher, and his greatest travels were throughout France and then Italy. He became quite renowned as a preacher and was able to gather hundreds of people to hear him talk. He was one of the most popular preachers of the day, brought about many conversions, strengthened people's faith. He kind of gained for himself the popular name of the Wonder Worker. Unfortunately, his life was short. He entered the Franciscans at age 24, and unfortunately by the age of 36. He died June 13th, which is actually his feast day on the calendar, 12/31, age 36, in Italy, in Padua, is where he died. He died in 1231, and as I said, he was called the Wonder Worker, known throughout Catholic Europe, and it doesn't happen this way very often. But by 1232, he was canonized a saint. So in 1 year after his death, he was canonized as a saint. His works, his preaching and his teaching renowned to the point that in 1946, the church proclaimed him a doctor. So perhaps you've heard of this term, doctors of the church. We have a few of them. Doctors of the church, they are men and women who have distinguished themselves by the profound effect that they've had on the church and on theology by their writings or teaching or speaking. So that's the life of St. Anthony of Padua. So if we take a look at this window from an artistic point of view, what we see is the child Jesus as a toddler appears on a cloud, standing before a crucifix on a table or an altar where St. Anthony was most likely praying. Anthony is holding a lily. So you look at the details of the window. These are the things that you don't really look at when you're just passing in and out of the church. But someone took a lot of time to put those details in there, and it is worthy of us to just stop for a minute and take a good look at it. So you can look at it now this way. It'd be much better when you come back in the church and look at it. I expect when we are finished that when church is open, I will find many people standing around the church, staring at the stained glass windows, trying to take in all these wonderful details that the artists of the Munich Stained Glass Window Company took so much time to put into these windows. So as I say, Anthony is holding a lily, and as we can see, Anthony is in a stone chapel. The window is open to that chapel. If you look outside the window there, you will see flowers and trees. Now, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but when you come to the church, you will come and stare at this window and look carefully at the clouds above the head of the child Jesus. And in those clouds, you will find the heads of 3 cherubs. You have to look very carefully, but they are there in the clouds. On the stone floor of the chapel, we see there a prayer book and a strange-looking thing lying there on the floor, which is called a flagellum. A flagellum is an instrument that in medieval times, religious practice penance by kind of whipping themselves with this. I don't have much commentary on that, but that's what it is, and the artist has taken the time to put that detail in there, and it was something that certainly was used at the time that St. Anthony lived. There are great details on the table covering. Again, you only see these things if you look carefully, that the artist has gone so far as to put the details of the weaving, also architectural details that you find on the windowsill. You won't see these things unless you stop and look carefully at them. Finally, in the front of the picture, you will see there is a potted lily. So Anthony is holding a lily, and there is a potted lily there. The lily is the symbol of purity. Anthony lived a very short life and a very pure life, and so that is his symbol. Finally, at the bottom of the window is the inscription, Ofiarowal Antoni Cortas. So that means some fellow from 1916, whom we know nothing about, but except that his name was Anthony, and he paid for the window, and most likely he chose St. Anthony because that was his patron saint. So here we have the St. Anthony window offered by Antoni Cortas in 1916. Another beautiful window in our church, a beautiful expression of the skill and the craftsmanship of the Munich Stained Glass Window Company of Chicago.